meeting to approve the December credit card bill. Does anyone have a question on that? Does someone want to make a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion. And just to refresh people's, we did approve a payment for credit cards in a generalized amount of $600. And I don't think we'll be doing that again because of the requirement that we specifically approve bills to be paid. And when the credit card bill was delivered, it's $1,200, $1,204.13. So treasurer's work, I would propose that we pay the credit card bill in the amount of $1,204.13. And the reason it's that large is a $876 bill for the Beacon mobiles, which were needed, and at a second Etsy purchase for $302.39. Two minor bills as well, $14.99 for Zoom call and $10.75 for Indicia. I don't know what that is. It's California, but $10 bill, $11 bill.
That's our service that we use to mail packages for interlibrary loans.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to make a motion to the board that we authorize a payment for our credit card for December in the amount of $1,204.13.
Is there a second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimous approval of the motion. Can we adjourn the board meeting now?
I move that we adjourn.
Oh, there he is.
Sorry, guys. My
Hey,
God,
Kirsten,
a work meeting that ran along there. My apologies.
no problem. We're
We
just
just
about to
con-
adjourn the board meeting.
Was that successful? Did you have a quorum?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we did have a quorum. Yeah, we
My
did.
my apologies. My intent had been to participate in that as well, so I apologize. Did people,
So shall we start the building committee meeting, Kirsten?
okay with me if other people are ready to move to that part of the meeting? Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. I'm going to go to my set items list here. Did people get a chance to look at the proposals that were received from the RFP?
Yes.
Okay. Let me get my. So I had pulled together a little synopsis of the proposals with just some very broad highlights to sort of assess a comparison on these proposals. I think they're all three very excellent firms, has some interesting things to offer. And we can get into the minutia and the nitty gritty details of that. But I think that the proposals are thick documents to really dig into. Does anyone have any questions about the RFP, the request for proposals that went out, and how those proposals responded to that RFP?
I don't have questions, but just reading the three responses this afternoon, was tremendously impressive to me, the other work that each of them have done.
Absolutely.
On places I've toured, places that obviously national importance, and the depth of the particular architectural services are so focused on historic preservation that it was very warming to even read them. So for me, I was very heartened by them. And just for my own edification, so at the completion of their services for us, if we pick one and engage them, is the next step to seek funds to apply them to our building, or do we already have ideas of and support for building improvement construction project?
That's a great question, Bob. I think the intent is, in addition to the historical analysis and review, is to also talk about how a library, a modern library, can function in this building as we move forward. And I think the request for proposals, in addition to the historical aspects of the building and the physical condition of the building, the three firms are charged with making recommendations or gathering information from our organization, and then bring in some expertise on library planning and design to make recommendations on how we might move forward then on a programmatic standpoint as well. And so I think this report that will be generated can be used as a basis for advancing the planning for how we proceed over the next several years, perhaps, in terms of maintaining the building as a building and maintaining the building as a library that is an active and vibrant and essential piece of our community. And Jerry, I apologize. I don't know, did this package go to you as well?
I haven't seen it, but I've been a little bit out of things for
And I
couple of
apologize.
weeks,
So
so-
I will forward that to you. I can do that momentarily.
that would be great. That'd be great.
Kirsten,
Yes, Evelyn.
I went through, now I haven't spent, because of this lovely weather we've had and the work I have to do outside now, haven't had the chance to thoroughly go over anything.
And
But I
that's
was-
okay.
I might have been missing or might be missing a piece because the summary and from what you just said versus what I read seem to be two different things. The summary I saw basically said who, what, when, where, but there was no other detail.
So there
No,
should be, I sent 4 emails yesterday. And the first one, it was the summary plus the RFP. The second, third, and fourth email were the actual proposals.
Right. But I guess my summary, all I see, unless there's a page I can't get to, it's the firm, proposee, consultant, 2 types of consultant, 3 types of consultants rather, who signed it and request. There was nothing comparing, at least what I've seen, comparing the 3 different proposals.
Yes, no, I did not, well, this is the depth of comparison that I have offered at this point.
Okay, all right, I misunderstood then.
You know, I don't think that we can make a, there's so much information in there, it'd be difficult to say, oh, this firm has done 20 buildings and this other firm did 30 buildings. I don't think we can get that level
no.
of comparison. I think from a historical standpoint, a restoration standpoint, all 3 firms are excellent firms. I don't think we will be making a mistake by selecting any one of these three firms in terms of their quality of their historical restoration work and the expertise that they will bring to this. I think really the differentiators will come to that second portion, which is the conversation about how does a modern library function in a historic building. That is a little bit different than some of these firms. Some of these firms focus primarily just on the historical portion. And you'll see that they've chosen to bring in a consultant then who can then advise on the library programming piece. So I think part of what we need to do in our interview process is to understand, one, how do we interact with them? What kind of chemistry do we have as a group with this consultant? Do we communicate well? Does it seem like there's a mutually beneficial chemistry? And then the second piece then is how confident are we in, or how comfortable are we that the consultants that they bring to the table will be able to address our other goals, such as the library programming piece. Now, we've gotten these proposals on Wednesday. I tried to go through and scan and understand these proposals. The one proposal from John G. Wade Associates mentions some pieces about a library consultant, mentions a $2,000 fee. That's part of their proposal that they've included. And it mentions a book by Ken Breisch, which talks about historical libraries and how historical libraries have functioned. But I didn't see anything about what they would bring to the table for talking about how our library works today. Now, maybe I missed it in the proposal, so I encourage everyone to please look at that closely and make sure we understand that well. And certainly if we choose to bring them to an interview, it's something I'd want to understand better. Now, I did come up with a list of questions, and I did not mail them out, so I apologize for that. I'm going to send those out now if people have access to email. So I'm going to do a reply all.
Is that something that Joy can share on the screen?
In fact, I could share it on the screen, I believe.
She may have to give you approval to do that.
Okay.
Do you see it on your screen, Kirsten?
I'm sorry. Let me
Oh,
just cancel
hang
that.
on. Okay, there we go.
So I do see share screen, yes. Let
Okay,
me
great.
open this up here. Interview questions. Okay, we'll put this over here. Minimize this. We'll do a share screen. And we'll do this screen here. Share. So can folks see my screen here?
Yes.
So thank you to everyone who participated in the Google Doodle survey in terms of your availability. It sounds like the time that is most convenient there for everybody and has been confirmed by the was the 28th of December. We'll make it a little bit bigger so people can see it a little bit better. Well, it's not cooperating now. So ideally, everyone said they were available between 10 and 4. And if we wanted to meet with all three of them, we could sort of lay out how that would fit within the day to work with people's schedules. So I hope we can talk about that later. I imagined we would do it as a short introduction. Introduce the committee members or people from the library who are participating, allow the applicant to introduce themselves, and then allow the applicant an opportunity to make a short presentation, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, about what they would hope to accomplish as part of their proposal. And then I think, the heart of the meeting would really be the Q&A session, when we would have the opportunity to ask questions of the presenters and understand them, what they're bringing to the table better. So there might be specific questions that have to do with things that they showed in their presentation, for starters. But then I think we would then want to understand what the applicants would, what they would envision as part of the investigation process. How would their investigations impact the library or library materials? Would it happen during operational hours? Would it happen after hours? Would it affect the day-to-day operations of the library? Question number 3, on what topics will your team be looking for input from the board? And what format would they do? Would they recommend doing group meetings or individual meetings or surveys? How do they anticipate engaging with us as a group on the board? Similarly, how would they engage with the administration? Are they looking to have meetings with Paul? Would they do it as surveys? Did they think this would take 2 or 3 meetings that take an hour each? Or are they thinking that, we must have a retreat that takes a week of Paul's time? That sort of thing might affect how we want to move forward, if that's feasible or not. What kind of input would they be looking from the staff? Does that jive with our vision for how this would work as well? So really trying to understand what they're proposing for a process to do this investigation, what the impacts are on the daily operation of the library, and whether we think that it sounds like they have a good understanding, or are they really coming in with, here's our pre-packaged solution and we don't need any input from you at all? That may affect what confidence we have in making a selection of that firm. In their presentation, they will likely show us some examples of what they have done in the past. The proposals for each firm include examples of what they've done in the past. And I think this would be an opportunity to understand, in question number 6, how the Troy Public Library is different than a library that is in their presentation. And how does this firm understand that difference, and what makes the services that they're providing to us unique and special to us? Or is this, we've done 1 million libraries and we're going to give you one more that's just like all the others? We want to understand if they're responsive to our needs, or if they're being just providing a standard product that is quite typical for what they do. And then the second piece of that is then, how is Troy different from working for a project in Virginia or in New York City? Is it something that is that they can make their recommendations for the library programming services specific to Troy? What do they need to understand about Troy in order to make that a unique solution that's appropriate for what we are and where we are? Question number 8, I think, tries to get into an understanding of how is what we are asking for different than just a typical restoration assessment? We are looking to understand what the building needs as a building, but we're also looking to understand or hear ideas about how a library works in our building as a organization or as a service that we're providing. So it's not just, we're not just looking for the nuts and bolts, and we want to understand whether they, as a the service that they're providing for us, starts to understand that, or whether they really are just here to talk about the technicalities of the built structure. And then question number 9 then gets into how do they approach the balance between strict preservation of an object, which would be our building in this case, versus the realities of the day-to-day living in that object and making sure that object still works for us as a vessel to support our mission as a library that serves our public, our constituency. And some firms may feel that the building, the library building itself, would trump all other considerations. Maybe that's what we want. Maybe that's not what we want. So I think we want to understand what their attitude is, and then we can talk as a group about whether that attitude that the firms would bring to that table would be consistent with what we're trying to achieve, or whether we need to, whether another firm might be more appropriate for what we're trying to achieve. Question 10 gets to a question of whether of the many, many projects that these firms have done, are any of them similar to what we are as a functioning library? And I said this, of the libraries shown in your presentation, which have as their primary purpose to provide lending service to the general public. Is that, how do people feel about that as a description of our core mission? Is that a good description? I see Evelyn shaking her head.
Oh, you can see me? Like,
I can. So Evelyn, what do you think our core mission is?
I think we have a much wider range of services than lending. We are not just a pickup delivery organization.
Okay.
We have programming. We have one-on-one with reference people. We have so much more.
So could you
Browsing, but the use of the computers, the use of the newspapers.
right? So could you help me let's put this in one sentence. Help me out with this, please.
Okay, if I can. Primary purpose to provide. We keep talking about the educational, empowering, empowerment services that the library offers to its public, but that might be a little too
Yeah.
philosophical for this.
Well, and that may cover a lot of ground if we just say that the Library of Congress as a building would meet that definition as well. I don't think we're providing the same sorts of services as the Library of Congress. So I think we want to.
The primary purpose, we have multi-tiered services. And again, I'm not sure if it's just calling lending, I think minimizes us so much.
I just want to make sure we're talking that it's clear that we are a library that serves the general public. We're not serving just researchers. We're not serving just,
Oh, I like the end. I like the end for the general public. It's the word lending. You know, if you took out lending and provide services or multi-tiered services. So whoever's looking at our library has to understand we have so much to offer. We have so much we could be offering. We have so much we should be offering to the public. Some of which is stymied by a building, some of which fits into our building, but they have to look at this from, again, a multi-usage perspective of a library. And if I'm shouting, I'm really sorry, but I can't hear very well. I have a plugged ear. So I'm talking so I can hear myself.
yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
I'm really sorry.
No, this is good. I want to do, I'm looking to provide some prosaic daily things as well as more aspirational things. So, tiered services to the general public, including research, lending,
Technology,
technology access.
yes. Browsing capabilities.
By all ages.
Yep. And abilities. Because we have that one floor that can't be accessed by the disabled.
Yep. So how do people feel about this? Of all the libraries showing your presentation, which have as their primary purpose to provide tiered services to the general public, including research, lending, technology, access, and browsing by all ages and abilities and backgrounds?
I'd like to see something about meeting or community or,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
that third place concept.
Yep.
Yep.
Because I think that is, in particular, is a direction that libraries have moved to.
Absolutely. I second that. And you have an extra Ed in background. Oh, there it is.
Thank you. I'll get that in just a moment. Access.
Hey, Marie, I feel like you, correct editing words.
Any help is appreciated.
Meetings.
I'm surprised you missed something in the last minutes. I was waiting for you to say something.
You mean levy?
Nope. There's another one.
Okay.
Okay. And I will send this out here so that everyone can take a look at this, and we can certainly refine this here before we have our actual interviews. But
Thank you.
thank you very much. I appreciate your thoughts on it. And then, so the last question I got there, what expertise does your team bring to the programming and planning of a 21st century library? Obviously, these firms bring lots of horsepower and expertise on the historical and the restoration aspects of the building. This library piece is a little bit different than what they typically do.
I think
So-
Jack Waite was on the board at one time, wasn't he?
Do what?
I think Jack Waite was on the board at one time, was he? On the library board.
I think I've heard that before.
Diana Waite was,
Oh, Diana, not Jack.
right.
Bob, I'm sorry, you've got a question? Yes, Bob.
Yeah, as I was coming onto the board, one of the things that struck me, I knew that there was much conversation about the building and different views. And when Paul explained how his time was spent, much of his time was spent maintaining the viability of the building, and sometimes surprise issues would happen. One of the three particularly said that they would assess the building to also include what additions and improvements or attempted improvements have been installed in the building that are not truly historic. And maybe I inferred that there might be some removal of things that don't add to the historic building that we have. But it also might help that sense that Paul conveyed to me many months ago, that he never knows what will happen, and maintaining the building is a significant part of his activity, depending on what the particular challenges are. So in that one proposal, I thought the idea of assessing for how do we get back to what's basic historic building and then function was an important step. The amount of maintenance work that Paul gets dragged into is always of necessity, but it's quite occupying. And if there's some way that we can approach this to also contribute to lessening that,
Mhm.
it would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely.
uh,
I think that's the hope, is to figure out next steps, and maybe it's a series of steps that we need to do to make sure the library is not the building is not a
Albatross?
albatross, yes, but it also that it functions as a viable to support the mission of the library as a functioning library. Now, the building has got a very specific and unique character that speaks to a library in Troy. You know, if we were in Gilderland, we wouldn't be in this building, and it wouldn't be the Troy Library, it'd be the Gilderland Library. I don't think anyone aspires to be the Gilderland Library. We are a library, well,
Well, I would like the budget that Gilderland has.
yes, there are parts of it that I think we can all agree that are wonderful. I don't want to disparage the Gilderland Library.
Oh, please, Tim would not be happy.
No. There are many wonderful things about it, but it's not the Troy Library. So if we can bring in the things that make that, if we can enhance what we have to make it function more as we would like it to function with our community, I think everyone would be happy with that. And without throwing out the losing the Troy character of that. Evelyn.
Okay, so what you're saying today, there's I'm maybe not hearing something that I've heard said along the way. So please tell me if I'm missing something. One of the things that through this process that you too, Kirsten has said, certainly Murray has said, and certainly it was in our strategic plan, was not only looking at the building in how we are going to make it into a 21st century building. And I want to be careful with my words. I know I might be misspeaking, and I'm trying to articulate it properly so you don't go, nope, that's not what I want to be clear about what I'm saying. I'm not sure if I'm going to.
Sure.
That it isn't just absolutely making it, but looking at it from the sense, what couldn't we, should we, how? Is this not the best way to become a 21st century library? How can we keep the integrity and the mission, at least part of our mission in this building, but look at it as a whole picture? And one of the things that has been repeated was maybe we need to say, we maintain the building, we work with this building, but what is the best use in the library structure versus having a circulating, usable library, and how do we go about that? That is the one thing that I don't hear today. That, well, maybe, will one of these people say, you know, sure, you can change this, this, and this, and you'll get something that's functioning, but it might not be the best thing you could get or should get at the money that we would have to spend in order to make it functioning as best as it could be versus other, you know, possibilities. I'm not hearing that from, you know, other things you know, in your questions. And again, I might be missing it. If so, you know, I please, you know, I'd love to have you clarify that for me, because at some point, you know, we keep hearing things about the building from staff and other people, that we can make this grand structure, you know, solid and fabulous, but there's certain things that might not be able to be done to this building that will keep it from serving this generation's public and future generations' public. You know, and trying to be pragmatic about not just current costs, but what that could cost to communities down the line. This community, rather, down the line.
I'm, I don't, well, and maybe I'm not, maybe I'm not hearing, I'm not sure I understood the question. I think we are looking to get information from this report that will help us decide on the best course forward in terms of the building and the library for the next 10, 15 years. And that may include what the building needs just as a building and its structure. And it may include some strategies for how the program, that is the things that happen inside the building, could move forward. And it may include things that are happening currently inside the building. It may include other things that aren't currently happening inside the building. It may include strategies for how those functions that happen inside the building currently and we wish to maintain, how they could happen in a different way. I think we have a two-pronged ask here. Did that answer your question, Evelyn?
In a way, but again, it seems to say, we are going to do what we can through this to shoehorn all this within this particular building.
I don't know. I don't think that's,
That's what I'm hearing.
No, I don't think that's necessarily, I think the building part is about the building, yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But I think the part about the library program, I think that will be open to further discussion, whether it's as an addition, as Bob mentioned earlier, or whether there are other strategies. I think that's all part of the conversation that would happen as part of that analysis.
Okay, because I do want to make sure that whoever's doing this is also willing to say, these are the things you're not going to be able to do here. So if you want to be able to do them, you can't do them here. Here are the things you are able, because many people, if you go to, you have a medical condition, you go to a physician, you know, GP, he'll think medically. You go to a surgeon, he'll think surgically. If you're doing this kind of research with this type of firm, they might be going, okay, we are going to think of in terms of this, and how do we do this and make it happen here, instead of saying, and again, some things that you have said, Kirsten, certainly some things that have been in the piece that's in our strategic plan, is compare and contrast. What can we do here? What can't we? And maybe we should be comparing other places. And I
Well,
believe in,
I don't, so the comparing other places, I don't think this is asking about comparing other places.
right, but no, that was, unless we know that we can't do things here and what we can't do, we don't, you know what I mean? We can't do that comparison with, but we could do it here.
So the analysis that we're looking for here is, I'll say, a high level analysis that is not, that talks about, like you said, what can we do here? What could we do in another way? But I don't think we're going to say, oh, this building is better than that building, or that sort of thing. And I think that's where we want to understand what this firm's process would be in terms of engaging us as a board,
Mhm.
to understand what are our thoughts and concerns, and to take those thoughts and concerns and synthesize them, or at least present them, to talk with Paul and the administration on what are the visions for the library as we move forward in the future. How do we synthesize that and pull that together, and what are the trends in the larger library,
Mhm.
I don't want to say industry, but the larger library culture, which direction our library is heading.
Right. Okay.
That's what I'm hoping we're going to hear some of as part of this process. And I think the local firms have, that's why I would expect them to be coming in with some consultants who would be able to assist in that process and guide us in that process.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answers are. I think we need to see what they're proposing to do as part of
I
this.
just,
And if there are any
Bob's
questions you
trying to
want-
talk too.
And I see Bob, and I will.
I just want to make sure we're not no firm is trying to shoehorn us, and that we are looking at its usage in its broadest terms, and how we can really truly best serve our community, and not just.
I agree with you, Evelyn. I want to ask Bob for comment in just a moment. And in the meantime, I would like you to think of, or I'd like us all to think about, what questions do we want to ask during the interview to tease out these important details, so we understand we're picking the right firm to help us get the information we're looking for. So I'm going to go to Bob to hear Bob's feedback, and then I'll open it up again to hear suggestions on additional questions we could be asking during the interview.
Yeah, I recognize that we're proceeding nicely, and I've done solicitation for these responses, but the idea of Lansingburg as also historic and part of what we have responsibility for. I just, when we went up there, and someone gave me the idea of Chester Arthur teaching Herman Melville in this school, in this room I'm sitting in, was somewhat astounding. And including Lansingburg, I think opportunities to interact more with children up there, and the Troy Library is so stunning that it dominates our energy, but Lansingburg is a part of what we need to be thinking of in some ways too.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. And we as a committee have a responsibility to keep that in our thoughts as well.
Right.
We do have a charge on this particular piece. I think the grant was specifically written for the Hart Library. So the grant is based on the Hart Library.
Okay.
The RFP that we put out was specific to the Hart Library. Now, as part of the conversations about the organization, the programmatic organization of what these consultants may recommend, may include comments that, hey, maybe we could be using these two buildings in a different way to provide services throughout our service area that might be more effective. Maybe they'll come back and say, hey, you know, you've got this other building over here. You could do some functions here. You could do some functions there.
Right.
But really, the charge of this RFP and the grant that drove this RFP was really the one building. But, and so that from the historical analysis piece, that's what I think this is going to focus on. In terms of the program piece, they may come back with some recommendations that go beyond just the confines of those four walls. And we may need to look at future grants in order to evaluate the Lansingburg branch and make sure we're doing right by that building as well.
It might be helpful just to help a mindset or put a placeholder. If we said the Troy Library is made up and include Lansingburg and say this grant is going to focus on the Hart building, by mentioning them in our correspondence, I think we bring them to mind, our own minds, and we wouldn't detract from the ability to focus on what we need to focus on about Hart. Just a thought, and adding a description, we sort of give it ownership, and we might help others to think along those lines too. Not in regards to this project, but in the future.
Good point. Thank you, Bob. Did anyone have any thoughts about additional questions we might want to add? And I think, Evelyn, you have your hand up, I think.
I do. Okay,
Okay.
this is not a philosophical one this time, very pragmatic. I think maybe at our last meeting, I asked about the longitudinal aspect of the study. And you seem to think that was a good question to ask. I wasn't sure where that fit in, or it needs to be a separate question, you know, because we were talking about the anecdotal issues like, oh, this crack is getting bigger. And when the gentleman from SHPO who started this ball rolling came in, he said, you really should be checking to see if it really is, you know, get factual information, not just anecdotal information. So I
Right.
wondered where that kind of longitudinal piece was going to be.
Okay, so we certainly can add. So we've got a question here. Do you anticipate that investigations will impact public access to the library or library materials? So you'd like to understand a little bit more about whether if they could give a description of the testing they might do and the duration of that testing. Is that?
Well said. Thank you.
Proposed testing methods and the potential duration of those tests. That may be a little too drilled down, but maybe we could say something like, can you describe the proposed test? Can you, do you anticipate that any of the proposed testing would span a period of, do you anticipate any of the proposed testing would evaluate ongoing changes in the building?
Okay.
I'll send out a copy of these questions for your review, of course.
Thanks.
And we can sort of assess this. So, does anyone else have questions or thoughts about the interview process or what we might want to cover during the interview?
I have some questions about what they submitted. I don't
Okay.
know whether they would lead to extra questions in the interviews. For instance, there's a very big difference in the totals. Yeah, about what, 55,000 is the lowest one, and the others are around 85,000.
Well, the 55,000 excluded some numbers that would need to be added in there. So if I will share my screen again here.
Yeah, by
Yes, I
my
remember
count,
that.
Actually, 59,000, Kirsten.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I type the wrong number there?
Yeah, I added those in.
So did I share? Am I sharing? Can people see my screen?
Mhm.
Yes. So, Paul, I think you said this is 5,900. Plus the 3,800 in addition to that. That was a plus or minus number for actual testing that they would do. So, you know, you're in the 65 to 88 range. So yeah, it would be good to understand why there's that difference. And I'm sorry, Maria.
How would you ask that question?
I was just thinking, why are you so cheap? Why are you so much less expensive?
We could ask, you know, hey, other firms are more expensive than you, and could you talk about why that might be? We can ask the question.
Because I mean, we're not talking about a small amount here. That's a
Right.
really big
Yeah,
difference.
yeah, almost 30,000.
So the firm that's has the low number, I think, has recently done work in the library.
Yeah, I was surprised to see that. They had, yes. Paul, how did you like working with them?
Yeah, I think they did a really good job. It was really two phases. This all involved the elevator and the renovations to the basement area. But it also involved a study that was initially done as a separate thing to locate the elevator in this historic building. And again, you know, they really made the right choices. And it was very easy to work with Beth Lacey on the whole elevator project.
I also think they were in kind of the middle of the three in terms of what they were allocating for the historical piece of it and what they were allocating for the library consultants versus Jack Waits, that was quite high for the historical piece and very low for the library consultant piece. And then I think it was Nisik who was was higher in terms of the library consultant and quite low, sort of the opposite of Jack's in
Okay.
terms. So I thank you. I appreciate your feedback, Paul, on that. Maybe we could ask them a question about that experience as
Yeah,
well.
I think though, I guess I'm still wondering what it is we want from this study. This will be my third study of the building. I go all the way back to one done by Bob Pierpont, but we had one done almost 10 years ago now by Butler, Rowland and Mays. Um, and I'm- I assume everybody has read that study, the Butler, Rowland, and Mays study. And I'm not sure what we want, from this study that's not really,
Butler, Rowland, and Mays is not, did not bring the expertise on the historic preservation portion of their analysis. They're more of a general practice. And so they talked about some of the library functional pieces and some of the obvious building soundness pieces, which was valuable, and they made some recommendations. But I think part of what we heard was that from a funding standpoint on this building, that getting a historical assessment of the building and recommendations from a historical construction and stability question would be valuable. So we do want to make sure we're not going so far in the direction, though, that we are looking at just the building as an object that has that disregards the library as a organization that needs to function and move forward as we go. So the intent, the hope is to find a firm that can address both those questions as we move forward here.
Okay, if I may,
Certainly.
Kristen?
Yeah.
Well, I would say if the comparison to Butler, Rowland, and Mays, certainly their last piece of that, we're making some recommendations of what could be done within the library
Yep.
to make it, a different kind of function, give it functionality. I'll just say, leave it at functionality.
Yep.
So it's not like they didn't do that. They had.
No, they did. They did.
Two, one of the things they had not done, again, we're going back to building itself. And again, the contact from SHPO, who had reviewed it and then talked to the board that existed at the time, said, the two walls that Rowland, Butler, and Mays said they couldn't really investigate unless they were cleaned and other things. Those could be, if done by a different kind of firm. So that was part of the motivation for going through this newer, this different review, was looking at the things that had not been reviewed as thoroughly. And the other thing that, again, I said it before and I'll just repeat it, sorry, is that there was those looking at the ongoing non-anecdotal issues with the building. Are those cracks getting bigger? In fact, he had stopped, pointed, and said, these are the things, you have to be looking at to see, are they getting bigger? Is there some faults here? What is going on with your building? So when you compare and contrast about this future study, certainly, again, just to quickly go over it, Butler, Rowland, Mays, it gives us some suggestions. We certainly weren't going to stop at one person's suggestions, and the adequacies of those suggestions, and two, some of those structural issues that were not dealt with in the Butler, Rowland, and Mays piece. So that's,
structures, I understand structures and I understand structural reports, and that's kind of what I was looking for. What I'm not sure of is what's the historic structures report. I mean, we have a definite need to understand what's going on in the west and south walls of the building structurally. I mean, yeah, it's a historic building, but it's also basically a structure with masonry and you know, infrastructure that holds it up. I mean, I don't understand what it is we want from them in terms of a historic structures report. I mean, how does that differ?
Well, the building techniques and technologies have changed over the lifetime of this building. They don't build them like this anymore. And many people don't understand how historic buildings behave, how they age. It's like when one goes to a doctor, one can go to a GP or one can go to a gerontologist who may be able to recognize things in a different way than a GP would. We're trying to find a person who can advise us on a specific older building and a very specific type of building or a particular type of activity that happens in that building. You know, a library is not the same as an auditorium. So we want to make sure that this report, and as I think you mentioned, Evelyn mentioned, the Butler, Rowland, and Mays report was able to provide some information, but was not as thorough as perhaps we would have wanted for some of these other pieces. How do we stabilize the balustrade at the roof? How do we confirm if that crack in the reading room is just a crack in the plaster that is done moving, or is it a crack that is in the bricks behind the plaster that is moving because something in the basement is settling? I think that's the level of physical understanding we're trying to understand of the building. In addition to then, how do we operate a viable library in this building as we move forward? What can we do? What can't we do in this building? And what do we need to find other solutions for if we can't do things inside the building?
I liked what one proposal said about identifying significance, historical significance. You know, if a wall isn't historically significant, maybe we can knock it out so that we have more flexibility in using the space. So I like that concept as well. And I would see that coming from a historical preservation firm where you wouldn't be getting it from the Butler, whatever firm.
Rowland and Mays.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, here I thought Butler, Rowland, Mays was pretty good about saying, and they are library. They have an incredible amount of library use expertise. But they were all into, we'll cut this part out, and we'll cut this out, and we'll just take this. And some things, you know, once we start doing any kind of major renovations, we are going to have to, you know, take certain things out. We don't have a choice.
So I don't think we need to answer all these questions today, though. I think really we want to get together with some of these firms or all of these firms to hear how they would approach this process and engage with us to see if either any of these firms are going to be helpful to us.
So may I ask another question anyway?
Of course.
One of the firms, Mesic, had a lot of emphasis on the use of technology. I
In
didn't
terms of
see
their
that
investigation or in terms of the library services?
in terms of their investigation. They're
Okay.
talking about using a drone and doing all these scans, and
Sure.
I didn't know what to think of that. Do you have an opinion on that?
No. I mean, there are many tools that are out there. Certainly, we want to have a level of confidence that they are using tools effectively, but one can achieve some things you might need to use very specific, very advanced modern tools, and sometimes they might be using it just to show off a little bit. So there are many tools out there, many ways to arrive at a final analysis. And so
Well, I think a lot of this is, I don't know, to me, it's theoretical. I mean, I need to know how that cornice on the west and the south side is supported. Exactly how that's supported and is it going to let go?
agreed.
You know,
Agreed.
there's some very practical questions that, you know, I have on the building.
Yeah. And those testing or analysis should help us understand that better, or to direct us on how to understand that better, because that is a great example of something that we need to understand.
Yeah, I mean, you can use a lot of bells and whistles, but if it doesn't answer those basic questions, it's not going to be worth it.
Right. I agree. So does anyone feel that any of these firms is not worth talking about? Any of these firms, these three firms that we say, this is just definitely not for us, we should not even consider talking with these three firms, one of these firms? Yes, Bob.
Can I ask?
I'm sorry, Bob, you're muted.
Very sorry. I think we should take the time to interview each. That it's too early to rule out. It might be educational and worth the time.
Okay. Evelyn, I'm sorry, you had a question?
No,
Me?
I
was-
work,
it's Gary.
Oh, Jerry, I'm sorry. I
Oh, I'm sorry.
apologize.
Yeah, that's all right. I'm in the dark here, but
I'm not getting the visual clues there.
were those the only, did we get other proposals other
No.
than these three? Why were these three chosen? Since I this is my first time on building committee. Planning.
These three firms were
I-
chosen because of their recognized expertise in historical building analysis.
Mhm. And we
And
got
so
other
these are the only three
proposals from,
firms that were solicited, and these are the three
Oh, I see.
proposals we've
Okay.
received.
okay, so we solicited these three firms. We didn't receive more proposals than these.
Correct. And we
Right.
only solicited
Okay.
three, we received three.
So, and I have not, I don't know if you sent anything to me already, but I have not received anything.
I have not sent them. I'm sorry, Jerry, I didn't realize that
Okay.
you were going to be
That-
participating.
That's fine.
And did you participate in the
That's
survey?
fine, but
Did you participate in the,
pardon me, I did not.
so
No, I've been
The sur-
dealing with a lot of other crazy things, so I
So
have
the-
not participated. in this.
the survey that was circulated had to do with availability for participating in the
Right.
interview process. The date that came back with consensus on the 7 respondents was the 28th of December. That's a Monday, the
Mhm,
Monday after Christmas.
mhm.
And are you
Mhm.
available on that date?
I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure. I may have family here, so it probably
Well,
will
I
not be.
think that given the consensus that has been shown by the other participants as well as
Mhm.
by the 3 firms, we would be looking to schedule interviews on the 28th.
Mhm.
I imagine the interviews would be,
Well, if I can be there, if I can be there, I will, but I can't commit to that. Right.
okay. Well, thank you for your flexibility and understanding on that. I will, after this meeting here, I'll make sure that the submittal packets are sent to you, that you will have those, as well as the sample questions
Great, thank
and the synopsis of this. So you have that for your
you.
reference.
Wonderful, thank you.
So considering the big discrepancy in terms of the emphasis put on the historical report versus the library consultant, should we ask a question about that, or do we feel it's covered in the questions that are listed?
I'm hoping that some of the questions might tease some of that out that we've already offered, you know, things about of the library shown in your presentations, which are geared toward the general public, or what expertise does your team bring to the planning and programming of a 21st century library? If you have any specific questions you'd like to add to this list here, certainly would invite or accept or encourage that. If you want to add something to this.
I don't at the current time. If we think of things afterwards.
Yeah.
Can we send those to you or send them
course.
out to everyone?
Yes, I'll circulate this list of questions and am open to receiving additions or updates to this.
I'm just wondering if the Lacey firm didn't, the discrepancy in the amounts they're charging, if the Lacey firm has already, if they just did some work there in the not too distant future, are they already thinking that, well, we've got all this already, we've done this part of it, so we don't need to do it again, we don't need to charge for that.
That's a good observation, Jerry. Maybe because they have worked in the building in the recent past, they feel they already have gathered some of the information they need in preparation for this report.
Right.
That may be, and that may explain why their number could be lower. That's
Yeah.
Yeah, I think putting an elevator in a building like that definitely gives you an idea of the structure.
right.
And actually, we did run into a couple of structural problems on that job, but I think the other thing is that you know, one particular firm might be more hungry than the other two, and that's sometimes the case with a low bid.
Yeah. So, given that, sounds like we would be interested in talking with all three firms. If we were to allot an hour per interview, maybe half an hour between subsequent interviews, does that sound like a reasonable way to approach it?
May I make a suggestion?
Yes, Evelyn.
So let's say now you have the 10 questions. Will you be doing the lead of asking those questions? And what about follow-ups?
Great question. I think that I think it'd be great if the committee or whoever is in the interview, we take turns asking questions. And certainly, I don't want to be the talking head on this here, and I think it'd be great if we each can ask questions and take turns and have a chance to be able to engage with the applicants and understand them a little bit better. They can hear about us as well, which is important. So I think it would, and certainly if we're working within a 1 hour slot, then we wouldn't want to get too far afield if we're doing follow-up questions, but certainly there's an opportunity for follow-up, make sure we understand what they're proposing.
Well, then I'll just suggest that maybe while we schedule it for an hour, we leave a little bit more flex time. So it's like really, truly an hour, 15 minutes, and then have a half hour between. That way, if there's any kind of debriefing for the committee members, we can do it then, or, you know, quick breaks for coffee or the bathroom or whatever before we have to go and speak to the next ones, the next firm.
So you're saying you'd like to do our interview, that's actually hour and 15 minutes, and then another half hour.
Mm-hmm. How does that sound? That way we have some float time. So if we have only that half hour and we're going over, we're not tense.
What do others think about that?
Well, I also think, are you thinking, Evelyn, that the interview might go over an hour depending on the questions, the responses, et cetera, that we want to leave a little time, a little extra time for that? Is that why you're saying an hour and 15 minutes?
Exactly, a little flow time, so we can
Yeah.
say, we're gonna make,
Yeah.
let's say, 10 to 11. But things sometimes go over. Sometimes there's, they
Yeah,
sooner, sometimes they do go over. Because if you look at how it went with some, let's say, the auditors or some of the other interview, when we were dealing with other firms,
yeah,
it can go over.
yeah.
So that way it doesn't stress us out if we have a little flow
Right.
time built in. And then some time again to, if we need to discuss amongst ourselves
Right.
after, while it's still fresh.
And I think
Right.
I would encourage not too much discussion amongst ourselves between interviews. I think it would be valuable to, take notes for ourselves so that we can remember what our impressions were and then prepare for the next interview. Sometimes if one participates in the first interview and then one starts talking with each other and you have a great conversation and then you move into the second interview, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, who's this?
Well, and again, I'm not suggesting, I'm talking about a very short debrief that might have said, oh, we need to look at this in the next one. Because sometimes like you said, like Bob said, we learn from talking to all three, but it helps if what we've learned from one can be used to the next one. We certainly learn that process during the auditors because, we came up with, firm X said this, we should find out about this from firm B, and it's not in our prepared questions. Let's add that or change this. So that's what I'm saying, is just a quick touch base before we get to the next one, and that gives us a better idea of how we interview the next person or the next team. I'm not saying a major discussion. I think that's for later.
Does anyone have any thoughts on planning for an hour or planning for an hour and 15 minutes?
I like the idea of having more than an hour built in,
Yeah.
because I think this is an important decision that we're going to make.
Yep.
And I hate to be constrained if we really need more time in the interview.
Bob, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Marie, but if the flow of it would work within the hour, it would probably help us stay fresh. Your suggestion that we rotate the questions and ask them, I think it would help us. We may even want to divide the questions, if not now, you do it arbitrarily, so that each of us think about how we would ask the questions and follow up.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be very revealing but doing a crisp interview will be helpful.
I agree with you. So why don't we ask them for an hour's worth of time, but plan for hour and 15. And then we'll schedule the next interview to follow up half an hour after that. And that'll give some time then to talk through that process and give time, if there's time that would be beneficial to the interview, we can allow for that little bit of extra flex. Let me just grab my calendar here and see what we got.
If I'm asking follow-up questions, do I have to be worried what I ask?
I don't think so. I think it should be an opportunity for understanding, and that's my personal feeling. I don't think we need to be constrained. Oh, you may only ask the following questions. These are my my intent was to offer these here as suggestions for a place to start. I certainly don't intend the questions I've put forward to be the only questions. What do others think about that?
Well, I think as the interview goes along, we'll think of, especially if we start with this basic group of questions, I'm sure other things will come up that we'll want to know. And I think we should have the flexibility to ask those
Yeah,
questions,
good.
I would think.
I think we want to be considerate of each other during the interview, so we're not
Mhm.
monopolizing time, that we're not
Right.
preventing others from asking questions as well. But I think that we as a group can work that out to be considerate of each other and the time constraints for the interview. I would worry if the interview ended up taking 2.5 hours long. I think that would not be considerate of the next interviewees and each other as committee members. But I think if we can agree to have a discussion within the timeframes constraints we've outlined, I think we should feel free to ask any questions we want, really. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
Well, I'm glad Bob feels it's fair. I thank you, Bob. I appreciate the vote of confidence. My hope is that we could have these interviews and come back with a recommendation eventually, or not eventually, but based on that interview and our follow-up meeting where we can make a recommendation to the board. If people come out of the interview and they feel the interview's been too short, we could talk about other follow-up measures after that. But I would hope that within an hour and 15 minutes, we should have a pretty good sense of how these different firms would be responding to us as an organization. I think all these firms are excellent firms, and I am sure that any of these firms would be able to do a good job for us. Really, it gets down to what firm is going to be able to address some of the nuances that we've been talking about today. So,
Amazing firms.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
doing national level recognized, awarded work. So we are very lucky here in our area. Not every area has this kind of diversity in that type of work, but here I think we're very fortunate.
Paul, did anyone else, aside from the J.G. Waite firm, come for an inspection?
No, just Jack's firm. He had kind of an interesting question that sent me back to the file on a renovation that was done back in the 1970s. It was amazing. You should see the prices. I mean, they did a major renovation for what we're about to pay a consultant for. I mean,
Yeah.
But there was some question that Jack was brought in on this back then. There was some question about the cleaning of the building and the cleaning of the marble, and the fact that a substance was used that was not approved, the substance being an acid. And they nearly lost, as I understand it, they nearly lost the grant over this disagreement. But I didn't see a lot of detail in my files on that particular incident. I don't know whether the files were expunged or what. But at any rate, It was kind of interesting. I know Jack anyway from years ago.
When you were discussing what one of these firms brings versus the other firm, Butler and so on, I had noticed when I was reading the weight proposal that they've written papers on the cleaning and conservation of marble. And I think that is the differentiation between Butler and the firms we're looking at, that there is that kind of expertise.
No, that's true. And yeah, he does have that expertise in that particular area, I guess. And there are elements to this. It's just that my major concern is the structure of the building. And, I guess I don't necessarily see how that differs in a 100-year-old building and a 20-year-old building. It's still a structural issue. It's still masonry, it's still stone and brick and steel.
They're put together in many different ways, though. It's the way things are done today is very different than the way it was done 150 years ago. How that cornice is attached, that the way they did it then, would definitely not be the way they would do it today. And the way they did it back then and how it's weathered with water penetration, what rusted, what happens when something's rusted. These three firms here are going to bring an expertise to that a general practice or a library specialist would not know. That is a differentiator, I would say. And I think that we're going to hear some valuable information on that aspect of the building. Certainly doesn't mean we throw out the Butler, Rowland, and Mays report that we've received. I think this is another piece that we add to that to add a broader understanding of the building and then the program piece in terms of what the library is inside that building. So I think I've heard that people think we should interview all three firms, that we should spend an hour and 15 minutes. We should plan an hour and 15 minutes per interview, plus a half hour in between each interview. And that would give us an hour and 3/4 per interview. Do we want to do one interview in the morning and 2 interviews in the afternoon? Do we want to do 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon? Actually, I take that back. I think the consensus was that people were available starting at 10 o'clock in the morning. So if we're planning for one interview at 10 o'clock in the morning, if we want to take a break for lunch, people want to eat lunch, I assume.
Lunch is good.
I like lunch. Good. We're on the same page. Good. So it sounds like we could really have one interview in the morning, break for lunch, and have 2 interviews in the afternoon. That being said, it probably doesn't make sense to start at 10 a.m. and then wait until 1 o'clock for the second interview. If we had the first interview at 10:30. Second interview at 12:30. And then the third interview at 2. No, it'll be, yes, Joy.
Kirsten, we have a department head meeting 10 o'clock on Mondays. It's on Monday, right? The 28th, you're thinking?
Yeah, we can move that, Joy.
Okay, sure, I'll tell, yep.
So,
All right, sounds good.
yeah, I think.
Thank you. Sorry. And
Jack has requested 3 o'clock for some reason. I don't know what the reason is.
well, then he gets a short interview. Then he only gets 1 hour because somebody said they were not available after 4. So if we could move him forward a little bit, we could move him forward to 2:30.
Yeah.
If not, he just doesn't get any float time.
Right.
Or someone might have to say they're leaving at 4 o'clock. One of us has to say, "Oh, we're out of here."
10:30. 12:30.
Actually, I should do this here.
2:30.
You know, my thinking is allow ourselves as much time, because if we begin to get short on time, we might not get as much information. I would suggest not pushing back till 10:30, but starting at 10 or maybe even 9:30 and give space. If we're doing it on Zoom, we can sign out for an hour easily and then come back and do whatever we need to do in that hour. I think all-day interviews are tough, but if they're squeezed together, they're even tougher.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't think we're going to do a marathon back to back to
But
back to back.
I'm retired, so but whatever you need to do, you'll have time in between. Hopefully, we don't have to stay on talking to each other.
I think, again, the consensus, I don't think anyone said, I don't think we had consensus for everybody saying they're available before 10 o'clock. So that's what
Right.
I'd suggest as a start time is 10 o'clock to get as many people to be able to participate.
Yeah, and I think it's Marie and Paul who did not check off 4 o'clock. So, I don't know if we want to make sure we get it done so they can.
I
participate
don't
fully.
believe after 4 o'clock is any problem for me.
Okay, so it's just Paul then.
What's
Well,
that?
we certainly want Paul to participate in the meeting. We don't want to.
Well, if we do a 3 o'clock for Jack Waite and it goes just past 4, can you stay?
Yeah, I can stay.
Okay. That might answer that issue. Okay, back.
So then 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, is that?
Fine by me.
Okay.
Any objections to those 3 times?
Yeah, you really can't just have.
Kirsten, can you repeat that again?
Certainly. 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. Okay. I think Jack Waite's office was the only one that put forward a request for a specific time slot. Does anyone have objections to Jack Waite presenting at 3 o'clock?
No objection.
It would be very discourteous to say I object. Very inflexible on my part.
Does anyone have any thoughts or preferences about the other 2 time slots?
Nope. Whatever works best for your.
Okay.
firms.
Just to consider, if we did what, 12:30 instead of 1, if there was any, if our time was squeezed, we'd have a little more flexibility. There'd be even amounts of time. Just,
Does anyone have objection to 12:30 in lieu of 1 o'clock? Okay. Then
Thanks.
let's go to 12:30 then. And I don't have a preference on, or any thoughts on who goes first or second.
I
So-
think since we had some concern about Lacey Taylor's pricing, it might be a good idea to have Messick Cohen go first and give a presentation and then kind of have something to compare that to, with Lacey Taylor.
That sounds fine to me. Thoughts? Okay.
Of course, it depends on when those firms say, yep, we can take that time or not, slot. I think we're flexible anyways, right?
Everybody said they were available.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Every time slot?
We talked about the day, but we weren't specific about the time. So
Okay.
only Jack Wade was the one who came back with a time preference. I'm not sure if it was a limitation or a preference, but
So that's what I'm saying. If one firm, one of them says, no, but we can't do it at 10, but we can do it at 12:30. I know I'm flexible with whoever goes first. I understand Paul's rationale. I think it works, but just in case.
So Paul, you'll schedule those appointments? Who's going to schedule the appointments?
I could do that, yeah. I had a question from Messick Cohen, whether or not a PowerPoint presentation was appropriate. I didn't answer that yet. I kind of thinking it wouldn't be at this point.
well, actually, I think what I described earlier, and certainly we can talk about that now, is that we could give them an optional, you could give each presenter the opportunity to do an optional short presentation, 15, 20 minutes, that may allow them to describe what they do and have done in the past in a concise way. It could be a PowerPoint. It could
Okay,
be,
That
and,
format is,
and I would defer to a little bit to Joy in terms of whether Zoom supports a PowerPoint. I don't know how that interface works, but I assume if we can share screens, they could run a PowerPoint on their screen that we could see.
I believe so, yes.
okay.
Yeah. So, and I think when we reach out to these firms, we want to give them an idea what the structure of the meeting would be. So what we talked about earlier was, a 5-minute introduction of the Troy Public Library group and the presenters group, all within 5 minutes. A 15 or 20-minute presentation by the presenter. And then 30 minutes of Q&A. And then a 2-minute closing by the presenter.
So we have 10 questions.
Right now I have got 11 questions, 12
So-
questions.
That's less than 3 minutes response time per question.
Some of them, does that seem unreasonable? That's an average, of course.
I
Some
guess-
people are more long-winded than others, which may be telling by itself.
I guess I would rather see more time with them answering our questions than them telling us what they want to tell us.
Sure. So you want to go to a 10-minute short presentation?
What do other people think? Well,
Certainly-
hearing no objection.
Yeah, certainly less presentation and more Q&A. Whether it's 5, 10, certainly I think 20 might be a little too long for presentation.
Okay, okay, great. Then let's say a 10-minute presentation then.
Max. Okay. You can say maximum 10. Marie, how do you like
And it's
that?
optional too. If they don't want to, they want to skip the presentation and just go Q&A, I'm fine with that too. It's completely optional there. I certainly don't want
Certainly
to
they,
watch somebody make a presentation that they don't want to make.
they gave us a lot of their responses too. So, you know, if it's repetitious,
Right. Okay. So we'll say optional 10-minute presentation. That would leave, say, 40 minutes for Q&A. And then 5 minutes for intro, 2 minutes for closing. 3 minutes for unstructured.
Kirsten, I think you would do it very well and not a problem, but if you thought you wanted a timekeeper, that might be a consideration, because if the time gets out of whack, it will be a misfortune for us. So whichever, either active chair with a eye on the clock, or appoint a timekeeper so you don't have to worry about it.
I think that's probably that's probably a good idea. I'm curious how you would see that person's role. If we tell them that, hey, you have an optional 10-minute presentation, and they go on and they get to the 10 minutes and they're halfway through, what would the timekeeper do in that case? I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Well, if you pre-appoint a timekeeper and they know the time frame, the timekeeper could just raise a hand and give them a signal to go 2 more minutes and speak. So a timekeeper might help you not be too distracted, or you could do the same thing yourself.
No, I like the idea of having a designated timekeeper. I think that's a good idea. I'm just curious to hear how that person then interacts. I think it's telling. If you tell somebody that, please give me a 10-minute presentation, and they give you a 20-minute presentation and just run on and on, that tells me, well, I don't want to work with this person. So I think having a structure is a good idea, and making sure they understand the structure is a good idea.
I
But
think
then
it also
see how they-
helps the interviewees to feel equally treated.
Yes, yes. Well, then I agree. To me, if a presenter were to run on and on for a 20-minute presentation when we told them we wanted 10 minutes, that means they get less questions. It means their Q&A time is shorter, and it would be points against them. So I certainly think having a timekeeper would be good. Whether that timekeeper is just keeping track of, oh, this person spent 20 minutes instead of their allotted 10 minutes. That might be one way to do it, but certainly it's something we can talk about. I think if,
For instance, it's half up or you got 5 minutes left, just to kind of keep them on track so that
yeah,
they can, bring in the more important instead of going on and on about something that may not be as important.
well, I would expect them to be able to do that without too much coaching, but certainly I think let's say we'll have a designated timekeeper. Yes. let's say the designated timekeeper gives them a 1-minute warning or lets them know, hey, we're almost there, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And then also keeps track of how much time that is spent then on that portion.
Or you could ring a little bell or something. That's, I'm thinking about the famous ladies' tea, which I've participated in, and they ring a bell when you have 1 minute left. So you know you still got all this material you have to present, and you have to really decide which is the most important stuff to get in there. So that's been my experience with a timekeeper. But if they know ahead of time, you know that they'll be told at a certain point how much time they have left. It might make them more efficient.
These guys are professionals. I expect them to be proficient and efficient and concise and respectful of the structure. So Bob, would you be willing to be that timekeeper?
Surely, yes. And I have access to a Buddha bell. Bring a bell over, and I think that's a good idea. Just a soft bell once a minute.
Yeah.
Yes, I will. I'll be very happy to.
Yeah, rather than interrupting, just a little bell reminder or something.
Okay. Okay.
If I could ask you, Kirsten, if you'd just outline the time requirements again, maybe send them an email or something. I'll get ready for it that way.
And I have it here on our these sample questions. So I will circulate these sample questions to the group.
Good.
And it'll include the timelines we've talked about. And so I would appreciate you guys to review it, add any additional questions you'd like to see in this process, and we can then be prepared. And we can talk about how we want to circulate, how we want to rotate these questions as well during the interview itself. And then, Paul, if you could then share the time frames and the structure of the presentation with the interviewees, that would be great. I don't know that I'd want to necessarily share all the questions with them necessarily, but certainly that they understand that there's a Q&A portion and we've allotted X number of minutes to Q&A.
Right.
I think
Great.
that would be very helpful.
Jerry, were you saying something?
No, I was going to ask exactly that. If the interviewees will have a timeline as well ahead of time, so that they can prepare accordingly.
Absolutely. I think that would be everybody should have the same understanding going in terms of what the structure of this presentation would be.
Mhm.
And, is everyone comfortable with that approach?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm very excited about this here. I really was happy to see that we got 3 proposals. I think the proposals have a lot of information in them. I think they're really interesting. And I think that all 3 firms do excellent work. And really, I think it's an opportunity for us to get to know these people a little bit better and understand how they work and what works best for us in terms of chemistry and process. And I feel like we are going to have an opportunity to get to know these people, and that we will be getting a great opportunity then to work with these people and to sort of set a plan that will, or get a tool that we'll be able to use as a guide as we move forward here in the next potentially 10 years. I think, Paul, you said we got our last survey done 10 years ago. So I think it's a very valuable tool to move forward. So I'm excited about this process, and I really thank all of you for participating in this and contributing to this conversation, and that we have a chance to have an ongoing conversation and chart a plan forward. So I'm excited about it. Thank you. Anybody have any other thoughts they want to share?
Yeah, I would just say in the role of timekeeper, I'll need to be somewhat flexible because you want to be courteous and helpful. Sometimes people get into something important. And so I'm not going to be interrupting a lot, but I'll see if it's looking like it's going to run more than 10 minutes over, I'd probably say something, but I'm going to try to do this in a courteous way with least notice so that everybody's free to be focusing on the topics and each other. I'll do my best to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think your instinct is right. I support that. Yeah, we'll talk. That's good. Is there anything further anybody wants to bring to the table at this time? And do I hear a motion that we adjourn the meeting? Can I make that motion?
Yes.
There we go. Very good. That's great.
Bill agree?
We got a lot done. Good
Okay.
meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very
Wonderful.
much, everybody. Look forward to seeing you all on the 20th.